So it's still pretty slow here for the lawn equipment hobby repair business. I suspected we'd get a lot of chainsaws. Well, I don't know if I suspected. I figured at least we'd have some chainsaws coming in this winter, but we haven't been cold. I think the coldest we've gotten down to was 17 degrees, and I mean today it's like 48 degrees. It's pretty comfortable. So nobody's cutting firewood. Everybody's still running their furnaces, and they'll cut firewood when it gets down to -4. See it, I've seen it every year we've been here. When it gets that cold, you'll hear all the chainsaws running. And they're cutting limbs and different things. They're going up and down the ditches just so they can have some firewood because their furnace can't keep up. I don't know why people wait. I don't know. I mean, my firewood fell over here, but I've been just dinging away at this. I still got a little bit to split here. I'll let that dry for 2 or 3 years. Just a little bit at a time, and I'm always got plenty of firewood. So, I mean, I understand there's circumstances in which you have to cut. Such as when the first year we were here, we cut all summer, getting ready for winter. And our firewood was still green and hard to burn. So, but I would suggest having a little preparedness. I don't understand coming out -4 degrees. I mean, I wouldn't want to be outside. I don't go outside. I just hate it. So as you know, I've been watching YouTube videos of lawnmower repair mechanics. One of the guys on YouTube, they said, you shouldn't be watching these videos. You should be out making money. Which, yeah, if there was money to be made, I'd be out trying to make money, but right now it's pretty slow. But I don't understand why people just assume that you can't stop learning things. Or you should stop learning things, or whatever. I'm always trying to learn things. No matter how much I think I know, there's somebody out there that's done something different. And I've learned a lot of neat little tips and tricks and make things faster and easier, and ideas that I hadn't had before that really just make sense. So I've been watching them up the storm. But the one thing that is a pretty consistent theme with all the YouTubers is, well, 2 things actually. And yeah, I think in yesterday's video I covered OEM versus aftermarket. They all think that you should use OEM on everything. And if you're going to use aftermarket, you have to use 2 or 3 specific brands of aftermarket. But none of this cheap stuff. It's all got to be really expensive, otherwise it's not worth buying. And in that video I was trying to explain that, like a carburetor. I mean, I even had a commenter tell me 9 out of 10 carburetors are aftermarket are no good. Well, I don't know how that's true. I mean, why would you come on my channel and say that after I just said I probably bought a dozen or 2 and they all worked fine? So I don't understand that. It's not that they actually have any experience with it. It's just they've heard other YouTubers say it. I don't get it. I mean, you've watched me all summer put carburetor on after carburetor after carburetor, and they all worked. I think I have one. No, I didn't have any. All of them worked. The one I was thinking of was I rebuilt and had to do it again. And not rebuild, but clean. So they all worked. And even if they need a little modifications, they still work. They just need a little bit of modification. They're not junk, like people keep saying. They work fine. And the thing I keep trying to harp on is, why do I want to put an OEM $95 OEM carburetor on a lawnmower, knowing that the customer is going to leave gas in it again, which is why they brought it in the first place, so it needs repaired again next year? Look, here's the thing. If I can charge them $25 for a part instead of $95, that means they're going to bring the equipment to me more often. That means I get to make more money. If I take all their money and spend it on parts, they're not going to have any money to pay me for repeat business. This greediness, or this, I don't understand. I don't even understand what it is. Spend all their money on parts when there are other options available. Another thing I keep hearing on YouTube is all the equipment that you buy today is garbage. It's not like it used to be. Well, there's two things to that. One, well, maybe even three things. I'm not entirely sure that it's not like it used to be. Things broke down. I remember Dad had a wheel horse. Dad bought me a wheel horse, I should say, when I was 10 years old. And the first thing it needed was rings. The rings were burned up on it. Which brings me to another subject I'm going to talk about in a minute. So let's just assume it's 1980 and this wheel horse was in 1970. So 10 years old. I'll even say 15 years old, just for the heck of an argument. So, and it already needed a major overhaul. So this lawnmower here is 20 years old. This is what people are calling junk. And it has not needed a major overhaul yet. It needed a oil change in the transmission. Transmission was pretty dirty, but that was lack of maintenance. It needed 2 ignition coils, 1 for each side. And I think that's it, a belt, 2 belts. All pretty much just maintenance items, and ignition coils go out. I mean, heck, if you look at those old points systems on the old lawnmowers, they were a wear item. They were supposed to go out. Whereas ignition coils, I mean, they're not supposed to go out, but they last a long time. 20 years on that one. So I'm not really seeing that today's stuff is just garbage. I don't think it is. No more so than back in the olden days. And the thing is today things are easier to work on. I worked on a 1970 something chainsaw this last summer, and I couldn't find one of the screws to get the housing off. And that's all I remember from working on those old pieces of equipment, was how everything was hard to remove, hard to get back together, assembled really bad. But nowadays they assemble things in manufacturing to make it easy for manufacturing. You know, three bolts. Oh, that's garbage. It's only got 3 bolts holding that thing on. But it's so easy to disassemble and put back together. I just, everything seems so hard to work on when, you know, back in the 70s. It just, everything was complicated when it comes to lawnmowers. Now, I understand, you know, cars. Today, you know, everything's a computer. So it's hard to work on cars. But the lawnmowers, valve adjustments on these modern lawnmowers. I mean, a valve adjustment is so easy. On the older mowers, you had to remove the head. So you had to come back here where the spark plug is and remove that head. Then you take the valves out, you grind them down, you lap them, you put them back in, and you keep gauging and gauging and grinding and gauging and grinding and gauging. And then you make a mistake and you overgrind it, then you got to buy a new valve anyways. But today, you take this cover off right here, the overhead valve cover. You take a feeler gauge and you adjust a nut. You don't have to do any grinding and lapping and all that stuff. It's really easy to do. So I don't understand the complaint that today's equipment is garbage. I understand that some of the parts break regularly, like the camshaft on these single cylinders. Yeah, they break easy. But I remember that wheel horse always having problems. The coil went out, which I think was what they were. I think the coil, if I'm not mistaken, was what replaced the points. I think maybe. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. So I remember it went out. It just always had problems. But today's lawnmowers are pretty dependable, unless somebody has not maintained them. Which brings me to my second point. That wheel horse, I said, the rings were bad. My guess is the oil hadn't been changed. So back in the 70s, when, you know, they made machines the way they were supposed to, somebody bought an expensive wheel horse and never changed the oil, made the rings go out. So he took it to a small engine repair shop, traded it for another lawnmower, and Dad bought it from that small engine shop. Lack of maintenance. So these guys today on YouTube are complaining about how cheaply lawnmowers are made. And they always have problems. He was working on a push mower that had a massive recall because the plastic camshaft was and when you hear that plastic, you think, oh, it's stripped out. No, actually the compression relief was sticking. So it was the same problem with the compression relief. It's the same problem with the Briggs & Stratton single cylinder, except they don't stick, they break. So Honda did a great thing and fixed it. They had these mechanics, certified mechanics, fixing these Hondas at their labor rate, sending out the parts. So it's not like Honda didn't just immediately, do something. They came out and fixed it, which I thought was pretty fantastic. Oh, it's just cheap, they got to do this. Why don't they spend some time and engineer these things? Well, I mean, I've worked in manufacturing. I know how it is. You got to meet production demands. You got to. And sometimes you don't have time to do 10 years worth of studies on a machine. You got to get it to market, especially if your competitor has already gotten one out before you. So sometimes you miss something, and they make good on it. So I don't understand what the big deal was, but anyway. So he's ripping into this thing. He's just mad about Honda and how terrible they are because they didn't test it right. And he takes the air filter cover off, and there's no air filter. And he says, "Oh, that's great. This thing's never going to last." And he's raking dirt out of the carburetor. This guy doesn't take care of his equipment. This thing's never going to last. I don't even know why I'm repairing this. That isn't going to last another year, which I agree. It isn't going to last very much longer. So why is he complaining about Honda? Honda is making a lawnmower that is going to last as long as the maintenance or the lack of maintenance is going to last. You figure, okay, a guy never does an oil change on a lawnmower. You can probably figure out pretty easily how long the engine is going to last. Let's say if you never change the oil, Briggs & Stratton knows that the engine is only going to last 5 years. So they do they keep the parts in stock for 10. Just using this as an example. So their expectation is 5 years, it's going to die, but they're going to keep the parts in stock for 10 for those who do maintain them. And then after that, it's why? Nobody's going to keep a mower longer than 10 years. That's probably about right. That's probably about average. So why make a mower that's going to last longer than 10 years? If you can make money, if a company can make money because you don't know how to take care of a lawnmower, why not make the money? Seems to make sense. But I get this in the comment section. These newer mowers aren't... The thing is, it was about the Beast. The Beast is 20 years old. These newer mowers aren't as good as the old ones. And I said, what are you talking about? The Beast is almost an antique. I don't think it's vintage. I looked up the words just to make sure I used the right one. Antique, I think, is 25 years. Well, actually, this is 24 years. This is a 2000. So next year, I guess it is. If I'm not mistaken, I forget. But let's just call it an antique for the sake of argument so I can get on with the conversation. So you're telling me this antique isn't as good as an antique. It's an antique and it's still running. How many of the ones that he is talking about are still running? They're not. They didn't last any longer. See, people seem to forget about history. I talk about this in politics too. Politics haven't changed. Things haven't gotten worse. Things have just always been bad. That's how politics are. Cars and lawnmowers haven't gotten worse. They're either actually the same or better. In my mind, Working on today's lawnmowers is so much easier. You give me a vintage lawnmower, and even without worrying about having to buy parts, I don't want to work on it. They're just hard to work on. So if you'll click this up next box, it'll take you to a video where I was working on something. So I hope I can inspire you to think about it, just so you know you're right. Sing, live your dreams. Thanks for watching.